Hello, I'm Kevin Burns. I'm a developer advocate on the Uber Cadence team. And today we're going to do a code lab walkthrough of the workflow replayer and shadower. And I wanted to give you a little bonus content on the why we created these tools and what they are. And later I'll show you how to use them in our code lab. So let's start off with a problem. So you have a simple workflow for onboarding a driver where you get some docs and then you do a background check and you return the result. Simple enough. And that will generate a history a lot like this. You start the workflow, you do your get info activity, and then your background check activity, and your workflow completed. Now that's a history record. Later on in your driver onboarding workflow, someone introduces a new activity, validate, to validate these documents. Now, ordinarily, that would just be fine. We add new code all the time, but Cadence is fault tolerant and it needs to be able to pick up from any step here, replay the history, and continue on. Putting this in the middle, the validate in the middle, this workflow could easily get stuck or fail, depending on the options you started the workflow with. And then you say, okay, well, we could just roll back the version. But now you have another problem. Now you have version 2 workflows trying to execute version 1. So the solution is don't get into this situation. So we here at Cadence, we created some tools for you to not let, to prevent these workflows from getting deployed. So solution 1 is the replayer. This one requires you to manually download a JSON file to get history to play against your workflow. And number 2 is the shadower, and a more advanced tool in which you can use code to query the actual history. And this, you can easily replay hundreds or thousands of histories against your new workflow definition. The replayer is great for local unit tests, and the shadow is great for integration tests, preventing you from getting, new code that's going to break merged. So with that, let's jump into the code lab. How to write tests with workflow replayer and shadower. So these are the steps we're going to follow. First, we're going to set up our environment. Then we're going to build and run our workflow to get some history. Then we're going to write a unit test for the workflow replayer, and it should succeed. And then we're going to do the same for the workflow shadower. Then introduce a breaking change. Then we'll run our tests again. First, the replayer, and see that it catches the non-deterministic error. And then we'll do the same with the shadower, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, we're ready to set up our environment. First, we're going to get our Cadence repo, and then we're going to use Docker Compose to using the Elasticsearch Docker Compose file. If you're using the regular one, take it down and bring it back up with the Docker Compose -es with Elasticsearch. That is required to have advanced visibility on, and our workflow shadower tests depend on that, so they will absolutely not run if we don't use this Docker Compose file. Then we will install the Cadence CLI. We're going to create a domain just for this lab. So let's start doing the steps. Clone the Cadence repository. This next step might take a little bit of time, as we need to download all these images. While you're waiting, you can read the documentation. Here, if you want to go deeper into the Cadence server installation or searching workflows, we have links into our documentation here. I'm going to go ahead and pause and come back. I'll join you once all the containers are running. And we're back. As you can see, all our containers are running. We have the Docker server running in this terminal window. So let's minimize Docker desktop and open a new terminal window. Get it right sized for us here. And we are going to use brew to install the Cadence client. You can see I already have it installed. Next, we're going to create a domain just for this codelab. So we have like our own little space. Later, we can clean it up here following the cleanup step if you would like. All right, our domain was successfully registered. So we're ready to move on to the next step, building and running our base workflow. I'm going to create a new directory for our project. I'm going to call it workflow shadowing. Then I'm going to open up VS Code in that directory. Let's change to that directory. And we're going to create a couple files. The first one, step one, is to create the workflow.go. And in workflow.go, we have a simple workflow. We're going to execute activity A. Then we're going to sleep for 1 minute. And then we're going to execute activity B. And we also have the definitions for activity A and B in here. Let's copy it to the clipboard, paste it in. Go to step 2. We're going to create main.go. Copy main.go to the clipboard. In main.go, we're going to build a Cadence client, create a worker, register our workflow and activities, and start the worker. Paste it in. Okay, step 3, initialize the Go module. I'm going to open up a terminal window. I'm going to use the split view. On the left, I'm going to name this worker, where I'm going to run my worker in. Then on the right one, just name that script. So let's initialize our module. Should now have a go.mod. And then we're going to download all the dependencies with go mod tidy. Okay, there were some errors. That's why I have this section here. If you encounter some ambiguous imports with the Google Gen Proto, this little section here, copy this, go to the Go mod. Let's try running Go mod tidy again. I'm going to clear that mess. And all is good. So on to step 4. We're going to run our worker in the left terminal. Worker is running. We'll just leave that running there. Step 5, generate workflow history. Let's create this script, run workflows. In this script, we're going to start 20 workflows, so we have a little bit of history. Let's copy the contents into that script. Let's make it runnable. And let's run it. Okay, now we'll take a few minutes. I'll meet you back here for testing part 1. Our workflows have completed, and let's confirm that. Let's use the Cadence CLI to list out some recent workflows. I got a new terminal window, so I have a little space to work with here because we're going to do a little copy and paste action on the next step. All right, so we have some history, and so on the next step, we're going to save one workflow history into history.json. I'm going to do a little tricky editing here. I need a workflow ID and a run ID. Let's make this even bigger so we can see it. So I'm going to take this first one here, copy the workflow ID. It in, and I'm going to get its corresponding run ID. There it is. Let's go back to VS Code. Here we see it. So step 2. So you can see this is kind of tedious. You could automate this a little bit, but it's not something you want to do over and over again. And we'll see that workflow shadower is a lot less manual steps. So we're going to create another new file here. This will be our replay test. I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. And now we'll go to our terminal window and we're going to run the test. So now we're comparing the contents of history.json to our simple workflow. I'm going to clear this, paste in our test run, and we got a pass. Testing part 2, integration testing with workflow shadower. So we saw the workflow replayer is great, but we don't want to be downloading histories. It just doesn't scale in a CI pipeline. So we're now going to do the workflow shadower test and key Here are our shadow options. We're going to look for scan for tests in the last 24 hours that have completed. And we'll do that until we're out of histories or we reach a shadow count of 20. Let's create this test, then run it. Copy, paste. We should be good to run it. And we got a pass. Let's introduce a breaking change. Now we've established our testing tools work correctly with our code. Let's see what happens when we introduce a breaking change. A non-deterministic error occurs when code changes cause the workflow to make a different decision during replay than it did originally. So here is our existing code where we execute activity A, and then we did a 1 minute sleep. We're going to put an activity C in the middle of that, which will cause a different history. So let's go to workflow.go. Let's put it in the same place here after activity A. You can see we haven't defined activity C yet. So let's do that. We've introduced our breaking change. Now let's run our replay workflow test again. See what happens. Will it pass or will it fail? We received an error, a non-deterministic workflow. In the history, it says the next event is timer started, but what we actually encountered was the starting of an activity C. So it matches what we expected. Now let's try the shadower. I think I'm expecting the same error, but this is going to run over, well, it would run over many tests, but it fails on the first one. With the same thing, history event, this timer started, replay decision was activity C. So it works. That is the end of this code lab. If you want to clean up your domain, I've left some commands here how to first deprecate and then delete your domain. In conclusion, we saw the workflow replayer, workflow shadower. I would choose the workflow shadower for your CI tests, and the workflow replayer for your unit tests. Thanks for following along. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. And if you have any suggestions for any new code labs, please leave that in the comments. Thank you very much.